Senior King's guards win hearts while posing with the public. The stone ground still felt cool from the night, and a gentle breeze moved through the air, carrying quiet sounds of footsteps, distant voices, and the clicking of cameras. Tourists arrived early, some holding guidebooks, others holding phones, all hoping to catch a perfect moment near the famous palace gates. For many of them, this was a once-in-a-lifetime visit. Standing near the entrance was a senior King's guard. His uniform was perfectly neat, every button in place, every line sharp and clean. Years of service had shaped his posture. He stood tall, still, and calm, as if nothing in the world could disturb his focus. His face showed no emotion, but behind that calm expression was a man who had dedicated most of his life to duty, discipline, and honor. He had been part of the guard for many years, longer than most people in the crowd had been visiting the city. People whispered among themselves as they noticed him. Some pointed quietly, reminding each other not to cross the line. Everyone knew the rules. The guards were known for their seriousness. They did not speak, they did not smile, and they did not react. This silence was part of the tradition. It reminded visitors that the palace was not just a tourist place, but a symbol of history, respect, and responsibility. The senior guard had seen thousands of faces over the years. He had watched children grow curious, adults become amazed, and elders stand quietly with respect. Some people tried to make him laugh, others waved or asked questions. He never reacted. That was his duty. Still, inside his mind, he noticed everything. He noticed the excitement, the wonder, and sometimes even the disappointment when people realized the guard would not move or respond. On this particular day, the crowd felt different. There was a calm happiness in the air. Families stood together, children holding their parents' hands. A group of students listened carefully as their teacher explained the history of the palace. Tourists from different countries spoke in many languages, yet all shared the same feeling of curiosity and respect. The senior guard could sense it, even though he did not turn his head. As time passed, the sun climbed higher and more people gathered. The sound of cameras became more frequent. Some visitors stood far back, simply watching. Others moved closer, careful not to break any rules. A young child stepped forward, eyes wide with wonder, staring at the guard's tall figure and shiny uniform. The child smiled, clearly impressed. The senior guard noticed this from the corner of his eye. He remembered his first day as a guard many years ago. He had been younger, nervous, and full of pride. An older guard had once told him that wearing the uniform was not only about standing still, but also about representing something greater than himself. At the time, he had not fully understood those words. Over the years, experience had taught him their true meaning. The palace behind him stood strong and silent, just like the guard himself. Its walls held stories of the past, stories of kings, queens, and generations long gone. The guard felt connected to that history. Every shift, every hour of standing felt like protecting something valuable. Yet he also knew that history was not only locked in stone walls. It lived in people, in moments, and in memories. The crowd continued to grow. Some people took quick photos and moved on. Others stayed longer, watching carefully, hoping to witness something special. Even though nothing unusual had happened yet, there was a feeling that this day would not pass unnoticed. The senior guard could not explain why, but he felt it deeply. He stayed focused, breathing slowly and evenly. His boots remained planted firmly on the ground. His hands stayed in their proper position. Discipline was not something he had to force anymore, it was part of who he was. Still, his thoughts wandered briefly. He thought about how many people came from far away just to stand here for a few minutes. He thought about how these small moments would become stories people would tell their friends and families. Nearby, another guard stood just as still, younger and less experienced. The senior guard could sense his presence without looking. He felt a quiet responsibility, not only to the palace, but also to the guards who served beside him. His actions, even the smallest ones, set an example. The air warmed as the morning moved toward midday. The crowd's energy remained positive and calm. There was no rushing, no pushing. People waited patiently, respecting the space and the rules. The senior guard noticed how polite everyone was. It reminded him that most people did not come to test the guards, but to appreciate them. A tourist whispered to a friend about how difficult it must be to stand still for so long. Another person nodded in agreement. The guard heard these words, though he did not react. Standing still was not easy, but he had learned to control his body and mind. He had learned to be present without being distracted. As he stood there, he realized that this role had shaped his life in many ways. It had taught him patience, control, and respect. It had also taught him that silence could speak loudly. Even without words, his presence told a story of service and loyalty. The senior guard did not know that this day would soon take a gentle turn. For now, it looked like any other day, following the same routine, the same rules. Yet something inside him felt ready for a moment that would go beyond routine. He remained still, calm, and alert as the crowd watched with admiration. The palace gates stood open behind him, and the world stood waiting in front of him. In that quiet space between duty and humanity, the day continued, slowly building toward a moment that no one expected, but many would remember. As the morning moved forward, the crowd outside the palace became thicker and more lively. People continued to arrive in small groups, each carrying their own excitement. Some had traveled for hours, others for days, just to stand near the gates and see the famous guards with their own eyes. The senior guard remained in his position, calm and steady, while quietly observing the growing interest around him. Among the visitors were families with young children. The children were especially curious. They asked many questions, pulling at their parents' hands and pointing toward the guards. Their voices were soft but full of wonder. Parents tried to explain the rules, reminding them to stay back and be respectful. Still, the children's eyes never left the guards. To them, the guards looked like figures from a storybook, strong and serious, almost unreal. A group of tourists stood nearby, discussing the tradition of the guards. One of them said it must take great strength and focus to remain still for so long. Another said it showed deep respect for history. The senior guard heard these words and felt a quiet sense of pride. He did not show it on his face, but inside, he appreciated that people understood the meaning behind his role. Slowly, a few brave visitors stepped a little closer to the marked line. They did not cross it, but they leaned in slightly, hoping for a better photo or a closer look. One young man raised his phone carefully, trying to capture the perfect picture without causing trouble. A woman beside him whispered, wondering if the guard could see them at all. The idea that someone could stand so still felt almost unbelievable. The senior guard noticed every movement. He could sense when someone stepped forward or leaned back. Years of training had sharpened his awareness. Even though his head did not turn, his mind stayed alert. He could feel the energy of the crowd, the gentle excitement mixed with respect. A young child suddenly waved, unsure if it was allowed. The child's hand moved slowly, as if testing the moment. The parents quickly whispered for the child to stop, afraid of breaking the rules. The guard did not react, but he noticed the small hand lowering again. Inside, he felt a familiar thought return. He remembered how people often saw guards as distant or unapproachable, even though they were human too. Nearby, a teacher spoke softly to a group of students, explaining how the guards represented discipline and tradition. The students listened closely. Some took notes, others simply watched. One student quietly said that the guard looked proud and strong. Another wondered what the guard might be thinking while standing there. These innocent questions stayed with the senior guard longer than he expected. As time passed, the crowd's curiosity grew stronger. People wanted more than just a photo from far away. They wanted a moment, a connection, even if it was silent. A few visitors shared stories about seeing guards in other places, saying this experience felt special. There was no rush, no loud noise, just calm interest. The senior guard felt something shift inside him. He remembered his early days of service, when everything was about strict rules and perfect form. Over the years, he had learned that respect did not always come from distance. Sometimes respect grew stronger through understanding. He began to think about how tradition could remain strong while still feeling welcoming. He did not plan to break any rules. Discipline was still his guide. But he began to think about small moments, moments that did not harm tradition but added meaning to it. He knew that many people in the crowd would remember this visit for the rest of their lives. A simple gesture, even without words, could leave a lasting memory. A couple standing near the front whispered about how calm the guard looked. They said his presence made the place feel safe and important. Hearing this, the guard felt that his role was truly understood. He was not there only to stand still, but to represent stability and trust. More children gathered near the front. their excitement carefully controlled by their parents. One child asked why the guard never moved. The parent smiled and said that being still was part of the guard's duty. The child nodded, trying to understand, then smiled again at the guard. That smile stayed in the guard's thoughts. The sun was higher now, warming the courtyard. The sound of footsteps and quiet voices filled the air. Some people had been standing there for a long time, yet no one seemed tired. The atmosphere remained respectful. The senior guard felt grateful for that. It reminded him that most visitors came with good intentions. A man in the crowd carefully adjusted his camera and asked his friend to stand beside the guard for a photo, but from a safe distance. They laughed softly, careful not to draw attention. The guard noticed how even laughter was kept low, as if the place itself asked for calm behavior. The senior guard's thoughts became clearer. He realized that curiosity was not disrespect. People were not trying to challenge him or the rules. They simply wanted to feel closer to history. This understanding brought a sense of calm decision into his mind. He glanced briefly toward another guard using only his eyes, a movement so small that most people would not notice. The younger guard remained still, focused, unaware of the thoughts passing through the senior guard's mind. The senior guard knew that if any change happened, it had to be careful and respectful. The crowd continued to wait, not knowing that anything special might happen. They believed they were watching a normal day, just like any other. Yet their patience and curiosity were quietly shaping the moment. Sometimes, change does not come from loud demands, but from silent understanding. The senior guard took a slow breath, steady and controlled. His body remained still, but his heart felt open. He felt ready for the next moment, whatever it might be. He understood that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, courage was gentle. As the crowd stood watching, the guard remained calm and alert. The line between duty and connection felt closer than ever. Without saying a word or moving a muscle, the senior guard had already decided that this day would be remembered not only for tradition, but also for something more human. The curiosity of the crowd had planted a seed. And that seed was about to grow into a moment that no one had planned, but everyone would cherish. The moment arrived quietly, without any announcement or sudden movement. The senior guard remained in his position, standing tall and calm, while the crowd continued to watch with patient interest. Most people believed nothing would change. They expected the same silence, the same stillness. Yet something gentle was already unfolding. A family stepped closer to the marked line. They were careful, respectful, and slow. The parents guided their children, reminding them to stay within limits. One child looked up at the senior guard with wide eyes and a hopeful smile. The child did not speak or wave this time, only stood still, as if trying to copy the guard's posture. This small action caught the guard's attention deeply. The senior guard felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He understood that the child was not trying to disturb him. The child was trying to understand him. In that simple moment, the guard made a careful choice. Without breaking his stance or discipline, he slightly adjusted his position so the family could take a clear photo. It was a movement so controlled and respectful that it did not feel like a rule was broken. The parents noticed first. Their eyes widened slightly in surprise. They did not rush or speak loudly. They gently lifted their phone and captured the moment. The child smiled brightly, proud to be standing near the guard. Other people in the crowd noticed too. A quiet wave of excitement moved through them, but no one pushed forward. Everyone remained respectful. Seeing that the crowd stayed calm, the senior guard allowed another small moment. He held his position steady, facing forward, giving visitors the chance to stand nearby for photos without crossing any lines. His face remained serious, but there was a softness in his presence that people could feel. It was not entertainment. It was connection. The younger guard nearby noticed what was happening. He did not move at first, unsure if he should follow. But the senior guard's calm confidence sent a clear message. This was not disorder. This was controlled kindness. Slowly, the younger guard also allowed visitors to stand closer, maintaining the same discipline and posture. The crowd reacted with quiet happiness. Smiles spread, but voices stayed low. People took turns, making sure not to block others. Some visitors stepped back after their photos, allowing new people to come forward. There was no rush, no noise, only shared respect. A woman gently thanked the guard, though she knew he would not respond. A man placed his hand on his chest in a sign of appreciation before stepping away. Children stood taller, trying to match the guard's stillness. Parents guided them gently, explaining that this moment was special because it was respectful. The senior guard remained focused. He did not let the attention distract him. Every movement was slow and controlled. He was careful not to turn the moment into a show. His goal was simple: allow people to feel close to history without harming tradition. The atmosphere changed in a beautiful way. What had once felt distant now felt welcoming. People no longer whispered about how strict the guards were. Instead, they spoke softly about how proud and honorable they looked. Many visitors felt a deeper respect than before. A group of tourists who had been waiting from the beginning finally stepped forward. They stood at a safe distance, smiling for their photo. One of them quietly said this was the best moment of their trip. Another nodded, saying this was something they would remember forever. The senior guard noticed how smoothly everything was going. There was no chaos, no rule breaking. The crowd had responded with maturity and gratitude. This confirmed what he had felt earlier. People did not want to challenge tradition. They wanted to be part of it, even if only for a few seconds. As more photos were taken, the guards kept their discipline strong. They did not pose in playful ways. They did not speak or gesture. Their strength remained visible, yet their silence now felt warm instead of cold. That balance made the moment powerful. Some visitors stepped back just to watch, smiling as others took their turn. A few people wiped away tears, touched by how something so small could feel so meaningful. The palace walls stood behind the guards, silent witnesses to this rare and respectful exchange. The senior guard briefly noticed palace staff watching from a distance. No one stepped in to stop the moment. Everything was under control. The respect shown by the crowd made it clear that this was not a problem but a positive experience. Time passed quickly. The sun moved higher and the light shifted across the courtyard. Still, the calm continued. The guards remained steady and the visitors remained polite. It felt as though everyone understood an unspoken agreement. This moment existed because of mutual respect. A child gently tugged at a parent's hand, whispering that the guard looked like a hero. The parent smiled and nodded. Hearing this, the senior guard felt a deep sense of purpose. This was why he served, not for attention but for moments like this where duty inspired others. Eventually, the flow of visitors slowed. Many had already taken their photos and stepped away. Others simply stood back, watching quietly. The senior guard returned fully to his original stillness, signaling that the special moment was ending. The crowd understood and respected this without complaint. As silence settled again, the courtyard felt different. It felt warmer, closer, more human. The senior guard stood as he always had, tall and calm, yet the memory of those moments stayed with him. He knew that what had happened was simple but powerful. He had not changed tradition. He had shown that tradition could breathe. And in doing so, he had allowed people to feel not just like visitors, but like part of something meaningful. The crowd slowly dispersed, carrying smiles, photos, and memories. The guards remained standing strong. And though no words were spoken, a clear message had been shared between them all. Respect, when met with kindness, creates moments that last far longer than any photograph. By the afternoon, the calm moment that had quietly happened outside the palace began to travel far beyond. The courtyard. Visitors who had taken photos and short videos started sharing them with friends and family. Some posted them online with simple words about respect, kindness, and tradition. They did not expect much attention. They only wanted to share a beautiful memory from their visit. Within hours, those images reached people across different places. Viewers paused while scrolling, surprised by what they saw. They expected the guards to be distant and unapproachable, but instead they saw discipline mixed with warmth. People noticed how the guards had not broken posture or rules, yet still allowed the public to feel included. Many felt something emotional stir inside them. Comments began to appear. People wrote about how powerful silence could be. Others shared how proud they felt seeing tradition handled with care. Some said this moment reminded them that kindness does not always need words. The story spread quickly, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it felt genuine. Back at the palace, the senior guard continued his duty as usual. He did not know that his quiet decision was being discussed in many places. He stood in the same position, steady and focused. For him, the day was returning to its normal rhythm. The crowd outside had changed, but the rules and responsibility remained the same. A few palace staff members had noticed the reaction earlier. They had observed how the crowd stayed calm and respectful. There had been no disorder, no confusion. Everything had flowed naturally. As they continued their work, some exchanged brief looks of approval. Nothing needed to be said. The result spoke for itself. New visitors arrived later in the day, unaware of what had happened earlier. They stood near the gates, watching the guards with the same curiosity as others before them. Some people nearby quietly told them about the special moment from the morning. The listeners smiled, impressed by the story, even if they did not experience it themselves. The senior guard noticed that the mood of the crowd felt warmer than usual. People seemed more patient, more respectful. They stood a little straighter, spoke a little softer. It was as if the earlier moment had set a gentle tone for the rest of the day. Inside the palace, discussions slowly began. Not formal meetings, but quiet conversations. Staff members spoke about how the public reacted positively. Some mentioned how rare it was to see such balance between tradition and human connection. Others said it reflected well on the values the palace represented. Still, no one rushed to make changes or announcements. The palace had stood for generations. One moment did not change everything, but it reminded people of something important. Tradition was not weak when it showed care. In fact, it became stronger. Meanwhile, the online world continued to respond. News pages shared the story, describing it as a rare and touching moment. People from different cultures commented on how much they respected the guards. Some shared their own experiences of seeing guards in different countries, saying this moment felt special. Many viewers noticed the senior guard's calm presence. They admired how he did not seek attention. He did not smile widely or pose in dramatic ways. He simply stood with honor. That quiet confidence made the moment feel sincere. Messages of appreciation appeared from people who had never visited the palace. They wrote about how the story reminded them of kindness in everyday life. Some said it made them believe that small actions could still bring people together. Back outside the palace gates, the guards changed shifts as scheduled. The senior guard handed over responsibility smoothly, just as he always did. He said nothing about what had happened earlier. There was no need. The memory stayed with him quietly. As he walked away to rest, he felt a calm satisfaction. He had not broken any rules. He had followed his instincts and training. Most importantly, he had respected both his duty and the people he served. That evening, as the sun began to set, the palace grounds looked peaceful. The light softened, and the sounds of the day slowly faded. A few remaining visitors took last photos and prepared to leave. They spoke softly, still feeling the calm of the place. The senior guard sat briefly during his break, thinking about the day. He reflected on how one small choice had created such a positive response. He did not feel proud in a loud way. Instead, he felt grateful. Grateful that the crowd had responded with respect. Grateful that tradition had been honored, not questioned. Elsewhere, people continued to talk about the story. Some parents showed the photos to their children, explaining the importance of respect. Teachers mentioned it in lessons about history and discipline. The story became more than just images. It became an example. The palace, without making any public statement, allowed the story to exist on its own. There was no need to explain or defend anything. The moment had already spoken clearly. As night fell, the senior guard prepared for another day of service ahead. He knew tomorrow would likely return to the usual routine. Guards would stand still, crowds would watch, and rules would remain. Yet something had changed quietly. People now looked at the guards with deeper understanding. They no longer saw only strict figures. They saw dedication, patience, and humanity. That shift in perspective mattered. The senior guard lay down to rest, knowing that his role was never about recognition. It was about service. And on that day, service had taken a gentle form that reached far beyond the palace walls. The story continued to move from screen to screen, from conversation to conversation. It reminded people that respect creates space for kindness, and kindness strengthens respect. Long after the courtyard returned to silence, the impact of that quiet moment continued to grow. And even though the guard would return to his post the next day, standing tall and silent once again, the world would remember that behind the uniform stood a person who understood the true meaning of duty. The next morning arrived quietly, just like the one before. The palace stood strong and silent as the first light touched its walls. Outside the gates, the courtyard slowly came back to life. Workers prepared the area, guards took their positions, and the city around the palace woke up to another ordinary day. On the surface, everything looked the same, yet something gentle had changed beneath that calm routine. The senior guard returned to his post as he always did. His uniform was perfect, his posture straight, his face calm. Anyone seeing him for the first time would never guess that he had been part of a moment that touched so many people. He did not carry that moment on his face. He carried it quietly in his heart. Visitors began to arrive again. Some came early, hoping to avoid crowds. Others came later, following travel plans. Among them were people who had seen the photos and videos shared the day before. They looked at the guards with new eyes now. There was more warmth in their expressions, more understanding in their behavior. A few visitors whispered to each other about the story they had seen online. They spoke softly, careful not to disturb the peace. Some smiled just by standing there, feeling connected to something meaningful. Even those who knew nothing about the story felt the respectful atmosphere. The senior guard noticed the difference. People stood a little farther back without being asked. They spoke gently. Children were guided carefully by their parents. Cameras clicked, but no one rushed or pushed. It felt as if the crowd had learned something, even without being taught. As hours passed, the guard remained still, focused on his duty. He did not repeat what had happened the previous day. He did not look for attention. He understood that special moments lose their meaning if forced. What mattered was not repeating the action, but carrying its spirit forward. During a quiet moment, the senior guard thought about his years of service. He remembered difficult days, long hours, and moments of doubt. He remembered learning discipline, patience, and control. He realized that all those years had prepared him for a simple decision that felt right. Inside the palace, life continued as usual. Officials worked, staff moved through halls, and responsibilities were carried out. Yet even there, the story had left its mark. People spoke with quiet pride about how the public had responded. There was no celebration, no announcements. Just a shared understanding that something had gone well. As the day moved on, more people came and went. Some stayed for only a few minutes. Others stayed longer, watching the guards with admiration. A few children tried to stand as still as the guards, smiling when they failed. Parents laughed softly and gently guided them away. The senior guard noticed one elderly man standing at a distance for a long time. The man did not take photos. He simply watched. After a while, the man placed his hand on his chest in a respectful gesture and slowly walked away. That small action meant more to the guard than any loud praise ever could. Later, as the sun climbed higher, the guard felt the familiar weight of duty settle comfortably around him. Standing still was no longer just a task. It felt like a message. A message of stability in a fast-moving world. In different places, far from the palace, people continued to talk about the story. Some shared it with friends. Others used it as an example when speaking about respect and tradition. The story did not grow because of excitement. It grew because it felt honest. Teachers told students how important it was to respect rules while still being kind. Parents showed their children the photos and explained that strength and gentleness could exist together. Many people found meaning in that simple idea. The senior guard never heard most of these stories. He did not read comments or watch videos. His life remained simple and focused. Yet even without knowing it, he had become part of something larger than himself. As his shift came to an end, another guard took his place. The senior guard stepped away calmly, just as he always did. There was no applause, no recognition, and that was exactly how he preferred it. While walking away, he looked back once briefly at the palace gates. He felt proud, not of attention, but of service. Proud that he had honored his role without losing his humanity. That evening, as the sky darkened and the palace lights turned on, the courtyard grew quiet again. The day's visitors had left, carrying memories with them. Some would forget small details, but many would remember how the place made them feel. The palace stood as it always had, holding centuries of history. Yet history was not only written in books or carved into stone. Sometimes history lived in small, quiet moments between people. The senior guard rested, preparing for another day of duty ahead. He knew that most days would be ordinary, guards would stand still, visitors would watch, rules would be followed, and that was as it should be. But he also knew that when the moment called for understanding, he would be ready. not to break tradition, but to honor it fully. The story of that day slowly settled into memory. It did not fade quickly. It stayed with people because it reminded them of something simple and powerful. Respect builds bridges and kindness strengthens them. In the end, the senior guard returned again and again to his post, silent and steady. Visitors continued to come and go. Life moved forward. And though no words were ever exchanged, one truth remained clear to all who remembered that day. When duty is guided by respect and humanity, even the quietest actions can win hearts and leave a lasting mark.